When? June 24th! Question for you. For someone whose whole online persona is based around Deltarune, did I not sound a bit strangely panicked there? Well, this video is why. That aside, welcome one and all to my beautiful Deltarune theory time capsule. For those who are unaware as to the concept of this video, allow me to briefly explain. I have asked 19 of your favorite Deltarune YouTubers to give me a crazy Deltarune theory that they genuinely believe could prove to be true. Hear me out, if you will. Why? Well, mostly because I thought it would be a fun community project, but also because, as I said, I want this video to serve as a sort of time capsule. Something we as a community can look back on after the release of Chapter 5 and get a good laugh or chin stroke out of. So, I introduce to you the cast! Sorry, we didn't have time for everyone to record an introductory hello or something. With that, I don't see any more reason to dilly-dally, so speak, my fellow creators! Oh, right, this is my video, so I should probably go first, huh? Well, I'll go back to a theory I made almost a year ago to the day. A theory that featured in my very first Deltarune video. Carol makes a dark fountain in her kitchen. I say this for one of two reasons. Firstly, if you know anything about me, you'll know that I'm a Carol Knighter, and this theory patches up the biggest hole in the theory of Carol Knight. That being, how the hell did Carol go from chewing out Noelle in the kitchen to meeting Kris and Susie in the dark world in a matter of seconds? For one, how dare you doubt Carol's very established prowess? Well, obviously Carol couldn't have taken the same route as Kris and Susie. There are some theories that reiterate on Carol's ninja-like status or say that she has a secret bunker in her house that leads to this closet in the church, but both of these theories fail to address one key factor. Noelle. Carol had to have chewed out Noelle. I genuinely don't see a world where Noelle just doesn't get chewed out. Like, what the hell would Carol say? Mom, Shut up, sweetie. Mama's got some dark fountains that need making. What? So what if to demonstrate to Noelle the dangers of letting others have the guitar loosey-goosey, Carol just opens a dark fountain right there in front of Noelle? This leads me to my second point of the fact that this would actually contribute and fit in pretty well narratively. A fountain being opened in the holiday house would give Kris, and most importantly, Susie, a valid reason to return and get the code. Seriously, how else is Susie going to concoct a reason to go back to Noelle's house so soon? Is Kris going to convince Susie to seduce Noelle so Susie can pull a kiss him and take their wallet kind of move, except instead of kissing, it's going to Noelle's house, and instead of stealing a wallet, it's taking the code and does his guitar? Now I know what you may be saying. Shabunka, if that's the case, why would Susie go to Noelle's house in the first place? Well, for two potential reasons that aren't mutually exclusive. For one, Susie could realize that even though she invited Noelle to the festival, Noelle isn't there. Sad. So she pulls up to Noelle's house and, Kris, what's that under the door? Alternatively, I think it would be really freaking cool if there were dark fountain plumes funneling out of Noelle's chimney and that's how they realized. Like, would that not be tough? Oh, and the reason these aren't mutually exclusive is because Susie could easily be like, Kris, we gotta go grab Noelle, I want to take her to the festival. And then the two of them see the dark fountain smoke emitting from the chimney. You see? Quick side note before I close this out, yes, this could also work on Snowgrave as well. Either A, this just doesn't happen because Carol doesn't need to chew out Noelle, and also because Noelle's psyche is low-key broken and Carol doesn't seem to care. She even seems to find it preferable, like what the hell? Or B, Carol does still open a dark fountain for whatever reason. Maybe to have Noelle get stronger or something? I'm not entirely sure. Carol's motives, both in normal route and Snowgrave route, are somewhat unclear, so it's difficult for me to speak for certain here. And I think that's about all there is to say on this theory. Really, it's self-explanatory. Also, no, I'm not giving this theory some short, corny title like the kitchen theory. Who do you take me? Anyway, let's bring in someone else to share their theory. By the way, a lot of these transitions that I'm doing right now are low-key gonna be pre-recorded. And also, as you can see, done with my PNG tuber. So if they feel a little awkward or disconnected, that's probably why. Also, a lot of these are first takes, so with that, my first guest will be none other than Cammy.
What's up, you little freaks? It's Cammy. So, what's my craziest theory that I actually think could be true, but also that I'm not gonna make a video of my own on? Okay, so this one has been brewing since, the Chapter 2 days. It was gonna be called, Unrelated Theory, the true connection between Deltarune and Undertale, because it's an anagram. So, the device theory, the device that Gaster created to connect to the world of Deltarune. Well, it's the core from Undertale. The device is the core. Gaster created the core, right? And the core has so many connections to Deltarune. First of all, observe the big fat fucking Deltarune door. These pillars that stick out of it are called darkness totems in the files, Gaster was experimenting with darkness, obviously. There are these vials on the wall that correlate directly to the colors of Noelle, Kris, and Susie, the very, very wonderful people from the intro. The life essences of the most important people in Deltarune are powering the core somehow. There are these computer screens in the core with dark backgrounds and green text on them, exactly like the computer screen you get in the save files in Chapter 1. And here's where it comes together. Here's the big one. How does the entrance to a dark world look in Deltarune? It's this wall of solid black. It emanates a black glow. What is the defining fucking feature of the core? The giant glowing white abyss under you at all times. That's the entrance to a light world, man. Deltarune's world. Those debates of whether Gaster fell into the core or fell into a dark world, fucking trick question. My theory is that Gaster hasn't been shattered yet. He's still alive and well, talking to us from Undertale. And Deltarune is the story of how he was shattered. At some point, when he enters the story of Deltarune, he's gonna come through the core. He'll fall into his creation, or maybe throw himself in even. But the core isn't what shatters him. It's whatever happens at the end of Deltarune that's going to shatter him. Hell, we might even be the ones to do it. And also, the soul we're playing as in Deltarune is the soul powering the generator in the True Lab, and also is Kara's soul. Whoops, did I say that out loud? Alright, that's it. Good luck, Shabunka.
I don't have all too much to say about this theory, but I think it should be known that the audio Cammy sent me was titled Shabamba.mp3, which I laughed at for like a whole minute, honestly. Anyways, wouldn't you guys say Cammy is pretty good at art? You know who else does art? That's right, my goat, PongoCity! Hit it!
I didn't go to fucking school for
Deltarune story analysis.
Obviously, I also put Pongo next to Cammy since they directly reference Cammy in their theory. Honestly, I'd say this theory is much more normal compared to the rest of the ones in this video. How about we go look at another relatively normal theory before getting into the super crazy stuff? I'd say the next most normal theory is...
Hi, I'm MS Paint Ralsei. I'm a small Deltarune YouTuber. Most of my videos are of the hot and funny variety, but I do occasionally theory craft. I'm going to give you a compressed summary of a theory I've been working on for about a month now. I have yet to name this theory. The working title is No One is Special Theory, but like, that's kind of dumb. Well, enough yapping, let me get into it. Our three main heroes are not special or important. They just so happen to have fallen into these roles, that the prophecy is seemingly assigning on to them. Each of our three heroes has seemingly at least one other person that could fit the role of their title in the prophecy. You know, the cage with human soul and parts, the girl, and the prince alone in deepest dark. Now I'm going to go one by one and explain why there could be other people who fit the description and could be this hero that the prophecy speaks of. The human cage with soul and parts could seemingly be any human, or at least any human with the soul that we play as. Clearly Kris isn't this special little them. If you know, at the very start of the game, we're literally crafting something that can take the role of Kris. You know, we don't play as the vessel, but there could be many different story reasons that have been yet to be revealed. Next up is the girl, which is the most broad category possible. It could be any girl in hometown, which, you know, currently there's like 2 other girls that are Susie's age, but like, it's the girl. It could be any girl, honestly. Already in the community, there is debate on whether Susie is the girl or not, but many people think that it is, you know, it's either Susie or Noelle. It's not like any girl. But I am personally subscribing to the all of the above option. There's probably many rebuttals to this. Oh, the portrait of the girl looks like Susie, or oh, it looks like Noelle. How could it be both? Or how could it be any girl? And I could argue about this, but I do not have enough time for that. Moving on to the Prince of the Dark, which, you know, certainly, that has to be Ralsei. There's only one Prince of the Dark. Well, first of all, Prince of the Dark is a not very descriptive term. It doesn't specify that they're even a darkener, just that they're in darkness, or they like darkness. It doesn't really just say anything. Now, there's one character that ticks all of the boxes that Ralsei ticks, and that's Lancer. Lancer is Prince of the Dark, even more so than Ralsei, because he has, you know, a father who is a king, unlike Ralsei, which we don't even know if he has a father. And even the people who have been slotted into these roles think of Lancer as part of the fun gang. Well, at least Susie does. I don't know what Ralsei or Kris thinks about this. But in my heart and soul, he's part of the gang. And although the prophecy panel does say alone in deepest dark, Lancer's technically not alone. He doesn't have any friends. He is a very lonely person before he meets Susie. But there's also another candidate for the Prince of the Dark, which is way more crack theory-like than frickin' Lancer even is, and that is Asriel. He's technically a prince, although not in Deltarune. He still is a prince, though. And, you know, maybe Asriel's super frickin' depressed in college or something, and he's mentally really in the dark. So, yes, prophecies are bullshit. No one is special. The world is a lie. Eat cake. Hug your mom. And thank you for listening to my probably very inflammatory theory. Depending on how fast I am, or how slow Shabunka is, I will probably have a full video on this theory by the time you're watching this, so if that's out, can you please watch it? Please? I promise it's good. And thank you so much to Shabunka for inviting me onto this. I am super excited to be able to do anything with, like, any YouTuber. It's just very cool. I have no idea how this is formatted, but probably on to the next guy. Or gal, or non-binary pal.
Pretty normal, right? At least compared to what we'll be getting into, trust me. I'd heard the idea of this theory thrown around a bit before this project, you know? Oh, and you also may have noticed that MS Paint Ralsei is actually a fairly small creator. So how did he get in, you ask? Well, it's mostly thanks to... Huh? What the heck is happening? Dude, oh my gosh, my stupid phone.
Behold, Kris is blue theory. Definitely the craziest, most bizarre theory that anyone has ever come up with. And no, I kid you not, this is not a shitpost. I am dead ass. Okay, well, maybe I'm not here to ask, is Kris blue? Because in the Dark World, Kris is definitely a little bit blue. Let's just say that. And while I have nothing against blue people, this does intrigue me quite a bit because it's a little different from the other characters' skin tone changes, or they just kind of slightly shift hues or whatever. But Kris here, Kris is the most drastic change of all of them. I think we can all agree on that, right? But what if I told you that this isn't just some random choice Tubbi thought looked cool? Now, for most people, the first thing they notice with Kris's skin color is the color of the Patient Soul from Umberdale, which is a very similar shade of cyan to Kris. And while I think these theories are pretty cool and all, the idea of this video, according to Shabunka anyway, is to be the craziest, most bizarre theory that I believe could actually be true. And when I say this is a stretch, I kid you not, it is. See, I think Kris's blue skin actually has deep symbolism rooted rooted in a religious meaning, similar to Chapter 4 and the Dark World and everything. To start, we need to look at the reason that Kris is blue. And based on this theory, the reason is because of a fairly lesser known condition known as argyria. Definitely the most famous case of serious argyria comes from Paul Carson, a man from Bellingham, Washington, who in 2008 appeared on Today and several other talk shows because of his strangely purplish blue hue of skin. And while this definitely doesn't look exactly like Kris's skin, stick with me here, because this is definitely the closest thing you'll get to blue skin in real life. See, in the 1990s, this man decided for whatever reason that to cure his stupid little sinus issues, he should consume silver. Some kind of weird homemade silver treatment he made for himself, which caused him to get this strange blue skin. Now, from what I've seen, there's not a whole lot of documentation on argyria or how the silver functions in the bloodstream, or whatever it does to cause you to look like this. But the most common cases of it are usually people who work with silver, in factories or probably in some kind of excavation or something like that. Obviously, Paul's case was quite rare, and as serious as it was, because he decided to straight up just rub it on his skin because, oh, my nose hurts. Now you may be asking, Zat, how does this have any kind of religious symbolism or any silver? The silver is what causes this. This is the most common association with blue skin in the real world, and it's caused by silver. And what tie does silver have with religious symbolism? Redemption, purification, and most importantly, atonement. Probably one of the most well-known examples of this is the story of Judas from the Bible. Now, of course, I do want to say, discussing religion here can be a bit of a tough topic, so I do want to be careful. We know ChocoFox definitely takes a lot of inspiration from Christian religion, especially considering that he was in a youth group himself as a kid, and probably had a fairly Christian upbringing, although, of course, a lot of Toby's past is quite mysterious, I think. But see, in the story of Judas betrays Jesus. He was one of the 12 disciples of Jesus who followed him around everywhere. For whatever reason, he decided to betray him to the Pharisees and tell them where Jesus was hiding so they could go and capture him. And he was paid in silver coins. Shortly afterward, he came running back to the Pharisees, throwing his silver on the ground because he instantly felt bad. And that was his way of atoning, was returning the silver coins. And it's often used and associated with atonement and redemption as a whole. Now, what does this have to do with Kris, you may ask? Again, assuming Toby's using similar themes as he did in Chapter 4 and had probably a Christian upbringing, I think, it's fair to assume that the silver that causes Kris's argyria in the Dark World relates directly to their past, some king of atonement that they wish to achieve, something they can only dream of in a fantasy world, a world where they can atone for their sins, a world where they're blue. Now, what those sins could be, I don't entirely know, but I do want to kind of shout out Rube's theory that you'll see at some point during this video, either before or after my theory, because they go a little more in depth about what Kris's upbringing might have been like and why they might have some king of guilt. Anyway, that's all from your favorite maggot today. Thank you for listening to the Kris is Blue theory, and thank you again, Shabunka, for inviting all of us to this amazing collab. It was so great and such a cool way to just collaborate one more time before Chapter 5 is finally out. Catch y'all later. I don't actually have a proper outro at this point. I just say random shit.
When I first started watching Zad's segment and it was about Kris being blue, I was so scared that it was going to be Kris drowned theory too. Do you guys remember that theory, or am I hallucinating? I think Halberd Chaos made a video about it. Well, anyways, it wasn't. So, moving on to the creators that mentioned at the end there.
Sup team, I'm Rubes. Thanks to Shabunka for having me on. This is honestly truly wonderful. We don't have much time, let's get down to business. I've had a pet theory for a long time now about the Chapter 3 egg path, and I emphasize that I want to talk about the path. I think the Chapter 3 egg path gets unfortunately overlooked, which makes sense because the egg room itself is literally man country. Copies are monochrome, big stuff going down, but I think the entire path is significant and worth analyzing. Also, this might not even count as a theory, and more so be fanfiction, but I'm not afraid to call it fanfiction. TV World is the most Kris-centered Dark World we've gotten so far, which makes sense because they created it. This means that we can learn a lot about Kris by examining not just Chapter 3's final egg room, but the entire path to getting there. All the egg rooms are symbolic of the trauma Kris went through when they were much younger, and the direct order things happen to them. Chapter 1 marks the very beginning of Kris's trauma. The tree is unsuspecting. You just left a field with plenty of them. In addition, Chapter 1's egg room can take 30 seconds to find, or it can take 10 minutes. To me, this gives off the feeling that Kris happened to stumble upon whatever they found. Chapter 1's egg room shows Kris unknowingly stumbling upon the Forgotten Man. Someone that they do not know will act as a catalyst for their worst trauma. Chapter 2's egg room shows the beginning of a cycle. The egg room is a lot more defined here. While it is still just a chance to get it, it is marked with tree graffiti. Kris knows where to go this time and is actively looking for the Forgotten Man to encounter him again. We'll go over this more later. You have to go out of your way in a dark world without forests of trees to know what this represents alongside Kris. So what I'm getting at here is that the egg rooms are retellings of what happened to Kris, going in order from the past to the present. With that in mind, Chapter 3's egg room is the turning point for Kris. We haven't gotten to see what actually went down, and I'm not trying to make a case for what could have happened to Kris, but this is when whatever traumatized Kris happened. Chapter 3's egg path has a running theme of Kris being a cheater. To access the room of the Bibliox, you need to tell this zapper that you are a cheater. In Man Country, one of the Flying Aces says that Kris copied 7 aces to cheat at cards and that it didn't work. And this is important that they also say that if Kris was good at counting cards, you wouldn't have needed to cheat. To me, this shows how Kris failed to predict the consequences of whatever happened to them. And if Wereram's taunting is anything, then they couldn't predict the consequences of something that they did. Again, I won't try and say what Kris did, but what I can say is that they were very young when they did it. With this whole motif of cheating, I believe their age made them naturally unaware of the gravity of what they did, and whatever they did was so reprehensible to them that they felt the need to leave their old home. That's the trip ticket, and that goes into our idea of the egg rooms showing a timeline. Kris's insecurities about being a human are undoubtedly important to their character. I don't think it's unreasonable then that Kris's past family will be explored alongside their past itself. With that in mind, the game room represents Kris's old home, and this Bibliox shows their old parent or guardian. This Bibliox mumbles to itself and is characterized by its forgetfulness. If this is all indicative of Kris's past life with humans, then this shows that their caretaker could have had some type of cognitive disability. Kris, being young, unknowingly took advantage of this. For what, I do not know, but I believe that they did. And this is what they regret so deeply. The language they use with the Zapper and the Bibliox, talking about going, quote, nowhere to me, is very indicative of how a child lies. They're sneaking out somewhere, going somewhere they probably shouldn't, and when asked about it, tell their caretaker that they're going nowhere, seeing nobody. It's hinted that the Forgotten Man dropped the trip ticket off at Kris's house. While trying to remember where the ticket is, the Bibliox says that it was, quote, unquote, left here before trailing off. And in Man Country, one of the aces implies that the man was looking for Kris. The Forgotten Man showed up to Kris's house with the intention of finding them and delivering the trip ticket directly to them, but had to drop it off instead since they weren't home. The narrative of Kris leaving their old home goes even further in the egg room itself. This shows Kris stopping by the Forgotten Man to confirm that they have the trip ticket and are booking it out of there, and the man is worried that Kris will forget about him. The man giving Kris a schedule of where they can go for the week is not just a gameplay hint, but it is the man reassuring Kris that they can reunite, that the Forgotten Man can tell them more. Whether 11 hours or 11 years, Deltarune will be waiting. This is why Kris is called a cheater. The Forgotten Man is an issue to Deltarune itself, going against reality as the eggs are the only way to bypass the PlayStation achievements for completing each chapter, quote unquote, without issue. Whatever the Forgotten Man told Kris, it was information that they were not supposed to know. I don't know what they could have done with this information, but it led them toward the event that traumatized them, the event that led them to leave for nowhere. To summarize, we're pushing time here, I know. All egg rooms are retellings of Kris's trauma in chronological order. Chapter 3's egg path gives us a glimpse into Kris's human home with their human caretaker who has a cognitive disability that a young Kris took advantage of without realizing the gravity of that. Whatever they did relates to information from the Forgotten Man that they were not supposed to know. And this goes further by the man sponsoring Kris's departure after they did something terrible with a trip ticket. Again, much thanks to Shabunka for having me on. Maybe I'll make this idea a full video at some point, I don't know. Banishment, basement, behind it, Bayonara.
Welcome back to the basement. No, ignore that. Anyways, yeah, Rubes, I'm gonna have to ask that you make this a full video immediately, because I was like the one Michael Jackson popcorn gif watching and listening to this theory. Now moving right along, we actually have the creator who was first to send me an edited segment. He legitimately made and edited this theory within less than 24 hours of hearing about the project. Like, that's freaking crazy. Anyways, speak.
My name is Tubbi. You may have seen me from my Guess the Deltarune character in 30 Seconds series, or my Guess Who series, or just some Deltarune info dump content I make. And I'm going to be talking about a theory that I like to call a beautiful blue bird flies in to save the day and then does it and is friends with everybody theory, or the Halberd theory for short. Because obviously the guy with the Birdly profile picture and who is the self-proclaimed #1 Birdly defender is going to have a theory about my goat. First, let's start by going back in history and explaining what exactly a halberd is. This weapon is one that was primarily used from the 13th to 16th century by the Swiss army in the Battle of Morgarten in 1315. It was also used to kill Charles the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy, decisively ending the Burgundian Wars. So if this is a weapon of Swiss descent, why is some bluebird from hometown, presumably thought to be somewhere located in New England, wielding one? Well, to explain that, we have to look at what a halberd actually consists of, because it's actually not one, but 3 weapons: an axe, a hammer, and a spear. So what? This weapon is connected to these 3, but the thing is, these 3 are some of the best warriors in hometown, taking on titans, being shown bench pressing cars in the middle of the street. And we all know that Tricky Tony does everything for a reason. He didn't just give Berdly a halberd because he thought it would be cool or because it kind of looked like his name. I believe Berdly is headed down a path of redemption, ultimately leading towards him defeating the knight, because what are halberds designed for? They're designed to kill heavily armored knights. Now, we've seen not even Susie's Rude Buster could get through that armor, but Berdly's halberd? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But hey, that's just my theory.
I think this theory might genuinely be one of my favorites in this whole video because it's just so peak. Like, yes, give me a reason to cope about Berdly being important. Also, Tubbi reached out to me asking to invite one of his friends, and that friend was...
Hey, yo, it's GeoBlitzy. I've never made a Deltarune theory before, but here we go. Here's a little something. It's about Gaster, and it's called the Gaster explodes and dies on purpose to rizz up the player theory. I hope you enjoy. So we're already halfway through Deltarune, and there are still so many unanswered questions, like what happened in the shelter? Who's the man behind the tree? Is Asriel a chud? But I'm actually going to go back to the original burning question. What's the deal with WD Gaster? What purpose does he even serve? Well, let's look back at how he was initially introduced in... So in Undertale, we only learn a few things about his backstory. He created the core, he fell into his creation, which may or may not be the core, and he shattered across time and space. So, to me, that sounds like a character whose origins are firmly rooted in Undertale's world. But wouldn't it be weird if the supposed big bad of Deltarune was just from Undertale? Well, here's the thing. I don't think he is from Undertale. Despite having a backstory relating to Undertale, no characters in the game really talk about him, with a notable exception being the Goners, which only appear upon random chance. What they say about him, and the presence of the Goners in general, really have no relevance to Undertale's story. The experience of the game would be exactly the same if they didn't even exist.
Say that again?
So, if he has no real bearing to Undertale's story, it just leaves unanswered questions. Gaster has to have some relevance, and it just doesn't seem like he belongs in Undertale's world. Well, there is one more person that references his presence. Beware the man who came from the other world. If only there was a game that took place in another. It's pretty well known that Deltarune was conceptualized before Undertale even existed. At least an early version of it was, until Tubbi realized it was too ambitious. So when making Undertale in 2013 to 2015, there's no doubt that Tubbi was concurrently coming up with new ideas for Deltarune, with Undertale being a perfect way to tease some of these things, thus entering the big wingding himself. And if Undertale flopped, he probably could have just wrote it off as some Yumi Nikki bullshit. Either way, all of these unanswered questions, like Gaster's entire presence, Sans' backstory, whoever the hell Susie is, are pretty clearly just teases for Deltarune, to get us excited. But these are Toby Fox games we're talking about, and he loves to make things diegetic. Saving and loading, EXP, those were all in-universe concepts in Undertale. And I think all these Deltarune teases are following that exact same principle. Instead of Toby Fox placing these teasers all around Undertale, it's actually been Gaster placing them this whole time. Alright, it's finally theory time, and I'm just gonna map out a possible timeline on what I think Gaster's origins and plan might be. So what if Gaster was originally from Deltarune's world and somehow found out about all the other universes out there and how the player themselves was actually controlling the soul in Undertale's world, you know, through some science bullshit. I don't know.
Ah, Undertale. That is a great game. It took me forever to beat Sans.
And maybe he was like, video game good? Godly player figure? Really enjoy Undertale video game? What if I insert myself into video game and get players' attention? Retroactively create history for myself and make me sound important. Maybe even Rizz up player on X the Everything app. Also, side tangent, do you think Gaster calls it Twitter or X? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Alright. Anyways, so after that, bro is now an ethereal being and somehow is using the player to, I don't know, help fulfill the prophecy or something. You know, he's planning something big. With his survey program and the Goner Maker, we're straight up just signing up for it. It is his Deltarune after all. He even remembered informed consent. Like, bro knows research ethics, alright? And that's how I know he's a real doctor. Alright, now since he knows Undertale is a great game, he might be the reason why the Dark Worlds are so gamified and the Light World just isn't. He's probably the reason why we're getting cool Undertale things that we never got in the original game. You wanted to fight Mettaton Neo? Boom, here you go. You wanted to see the full potential of GeoBlitzy? Boom. Here you go. And to those who think Gaster's simply just like a neutral observer, you're probably right, but just for now. That doesn't mean we're not pawns in his big experiment. If we're somehow able to throw it off the rails, I'd imagine he'd be pretty pissed off, you know? Alright, boom, Gaster boss fight, still on the table. Maybe it's even intended in the prophecy, you know, the angel banished will finally meet with his desire. Yo, I want to fight Gaster. Alright, that's my desire. Gaster boss fight, come on now. Alright, so timeline recap. Basically, Gaster starts off in Deltarune's light world and learns about other realities. He intentionally shatters himself across time and space into Undertale and Twitter.com for some reason. Then he aura farms for a bit, you know, to get our attention, thus luring us into whatever plan he's cooking up. And that's about it. Anyways, that's the bulk of my Gaster theory. You know, it might seem a little bit like reheated nachos since it was a lot of just recapping and elements from other theories jumbled together, but hopefully I've been able to map out, you know, a proper story of my own. I don't know. And if I were to add one more thing, I think Sans and Papyrus could very well fit into this storyline. You know, perhaps in like chapter 6, we find out they've been investigating their buddy Gaster this whole time, you know, trying to figure out what happened to him, like, you know, a bunch of mystery solvers, and eventually Sans builds a machine from Undertale, and then when the roaring happens, everything crashes and burns and they have to get the hell out of there, and then they strand themselves in Undertale's world. Maybe, perhaps, I don't know. Anyways, shout out Shabunka for having me on. I've kind of just been rambling, but you know, I've never made a video like this before, so it's just a pleasure to just spitball, yap a bit, and, you know, come up with some potential backstory for our favorite skeletons. All right, peace out, everyone.
I know GeoBlitzy isn't technically a Deltarune YouTuber, but he still gets involved with Deltarune stuff. GeoBlitzy is also, he also does shorts, and you know who else makes shorts? Listen, I'm cisgender, I'm not very good at transition.
Hey, me WeebBear, theory time. I believe that Noelle's going to make a hospital Dark World, and I've even got a rough idea how it'll happen. Gerson tells us that the Lord of the Hammer is based on the prophecy, and Susie responds with, isn't Lord of the Hammer the book Dragon Blazers is based on? Now, connect that with this Noelle blog post from the Spamton sweepstakes that talks about Dragon Blazers. In particular, normally, one of the characters is supposed to guide you through the maze, but it became one of the most famous parts of the game because if you go there without that character, you'll get basically stuck forever. Here's where things connect. The cross-shaped maze in the ice area from Dragon Blazers that Noelle is describing is almost one-for-one with the part in the Mantle game where White Cloak guides us. All this special attention to Dragon Blazers being based off of the prophecy must mean something, like foretelling future events in a game based around fate, perhaps? Picture this with me for a sec. The Fun Gang reaches a point in a new Dark World where they cannot proceed. The only way forward is something related to ice magic, and they could tell Noelle, but remember, that would mean admitting we've been lying to her about Chapter 2 being a dream. Then comes a big scene where we reveal the ruse to her and ask for her help. After some hesitation, apologies, and hurt feelings, she agrees to come along. She comes to the Dark World, casts her magic, helps the heroes save the day. Shortly after this point, Rudy gets sick, like critical condition and can die any minute sick. Noelle rushes to her dad, they have a heartfelt scene together where Rudy says goodbye, and she ends up creating a Dark World in an attempt to save her father. If you remember, this connects back to her comment in Chapter 2's visit with her dad. I wish I knew healing magic in real life. Then I'd make you better. The confession earlier on is why Noelle knows how to make a dark world, because she was there when Queen explained it in Chapter 2. That's it for my Chapter 5 predictions. Thanks for having me, Shabunka.
Yes, this theory. Oh, I love this theory so much. I'm so glad he grabbed actual evidence for it via the White Cloak shenanigans, and it wasn't just based off Noelle's one-off comment in Chapter 2, because that's what I always said it as my sole reasoning. Something that could make this theory even crazier is if Rudy was the knight, and this is how the Fun Gang finds out. Imagine Rudy saying, "Don't make a dark fountain," the same way Ralsei does in Chapter 4. Oh my gosh. Anyways, initially I was gonna make a joke here where I'd be like, "Oh, haha, sorry for wasting your time with my yapping. Now here's Seek." And it would be like super cool or something, but Seek had to cancel last second due to being busy with other projects. By the way, I think now is a good time to mention, do not be mean to any creators who decline my offer for whatever reason. Unless it is Andrew Cunningham. I'm kidding, just don't. Be chill. This video is just the test run of this concept anyway. Alright, I'm supposed to be going on to the next creator. We'll go with Brix Braxium, since he's kind of the guy who got me in touch with Seek.
Hello, I am Brix Braxium, Deltarune lore nerd and theorist. Can we talk about Ram? I've been dying to talk about Ram with you all day. There's actually way more that I could say about this theory. I did a whole long form post about it over on Tumblr, but I'm going to do my best to condense it right now into the basics. Ram is so weird. At the end of the sword route, he just disappears. Where does he go? No, seriously, where does he go? Our only source for what happened to him is this dialogue from Rabbik.
Kris, I was so scared I couldn't move. Ram was... Wait a second, that's funny. Kris, didn't you already go past?
The Rabbik claims to have seen something relating to Ram, but then gets distracted by Kris here, claiming that they just went past. What is fascinating about this is that the Rabbik is not scared of Kris, suggesting that whatever they saw happen to Ram did not involve Kris. The common interpretation of this seems to be that Hero Sword killed Ram or something, but that doesn't make sense. Surely, if this Rabbik saw Kris murder Ram right in front of them, they'd 1, be scared of Kris, and 2, wouldn't be telling Kris what they just saw, because Kris was there. What is even stranger is the clarification that the Rabbik could not move. This means that whatever they saw it from this position, out in the hallway. Ram was not in the hallway. He was frozen a statue down the hall past 2 corners. What we must conclude from this is that Ram, by some means, moved into the hallway. And I think that the only reasonable explanation is that he was taken. Here is my pitch. 1. The mantle holder is some sort of spirit or ghost that possesses something. 2. They were possessing the shadow mantle when we fought them. 3. After we defeat them, they then give the mantle to us, leaving them without a vessel. 4. Now that they don't have a vessel, they take Ram, who is sitting right there, primed for the taking. 5. The Rabbik sees this now possessed Ram flee the scene. I believe that we will see the mantle holder later in the game if you did the sword route. And further, I believe that Ram will be forced into being its vessel, and this will lead to the most epic 1v1 showdown of history. Or perhaps more accurately, a 2v2. Kris and the player versus the mantle holder and Ram. Seems quite a fitting parallel to me, especially because by the time this rematch happens, we might be on better terms with Kris. You might think that Ram isn't powerful enough to really fight Kris like this. But remember that Ram is a plug boy, and plug boys are quite known for having a more powerful alternative state that they enter when controlled. And if we take a look at Werewire, we can notice a lot of similarities between them and the sword route. Werewire's check notes that it absorbed the wire and became stronger, and Werewire is described as sleepwalking through a nightmare. The Shadow Mantle holder and the idea of nightmares are fairly easy to connect. There's the soundtrack song Wereramb, which if you take that name and spell it backwards, it's mare, like nightmare. And further, the Shadow Mantle fight in general seems to be a reference to the Link's Awakening bosses, which are all nightmares. Perhaps most strikingly though, if you act against a Werewire, the narration tells you that the air crackles with fighting spirit. This is the only time in the game that the air crackles is used outside of the context of a secret boss or a character directly related to one. This is how Ram can still win. He's coming back. The Wereramb is real.
I really like this theory for the sole fact that I absolutely adore Ram's stupid clip farming ass, and I need him to be relevant again. Also, unrelated to the theory, but Brix Braxium actually helped me quite a bit with this project. A very good friend to have in this collab. Speaking of, some of you may know that I've actually done a collab with a Deltarune creator before, that of course being Freezie.
Hey, it's me, Freezie. First of all, I'd just like to give a big thanks to Shabunka for having me on this project. I'm still a pretty small channel, so it really is an honor for me to be featured here. Anyways, I won't take up too much of your time, but for my wacky theory, I present to you Frisk Night Theory. At the end of Undertale's genocide route, Chara mentions moving on from this world and on to the next, after erasing the world of Undertale. Naturally, said next world could imply the world of Deltarune, and the roaring would obviously be its erasure. Kris is obviously Deltarune's version of Chara, who is seemingly in a partnership with the Knight. Chara refers to Frisk as a partner at the end of the genocide route, which could mean the Knight is Frisk or this world's equivalent. The Roaring Knight also uses a knife as their primary weapon, just like Frisk from the genocide route. Both characters are also silent and very powerful. At the very start of Deltarune, when your soul is about to be placed into the vessel, the voice who suddenly interrupts you and assigns you to Kris clearly isn't Gaster. The text style, albeit generic, does match that of Chara's. Chara placing the soul inside of their own alternate universe variant could line up with Chara's goals at the end of the genocide route. The Darkners in Chapter 4 attack Kris and the gang, under the assumption that Kris is actually the Knight. Kris bears a striking resemblance to Frisk, and given how vague the prophecy can be with names and appearances, it would make sense for the Darkners to mix them up. The Knight also uses similar attacks to those that Sans used, and Genocide Frisk did fight Sans. Frisk's original concept armor and weapon consisted of a Planet Buster sword and soul armor. A high-tier armor and sword are exactly the equipment that the Knight uses. So far, the Knight has also attacked Light World residents in a similar order to that of the bosses killed in Undertale. First, they go for Toriel, then Undyne, and Asgore's flower shop seems to be next. This is a bit of a stretch as this doesn't include Papyrus and Mettaton, but neither of those characters even properly appear in Deltarune so far, so I'm not worrying about them. We also don't know if Asgore is actually working with the Knight or if he's going to be attacked by the Knight, but again, this isn't the strongest point of evidence. So yeah, that's all the evidence I've got for this theory so far. I mean, it is mostly just a joke theory, but if something cool does come out in Chapter 5 and I find more evidence, then maybe I'll make an actual video on this, who knows. Anyways, that's all for today. I've been Freezie, and I will see you next time. Just probably not on this channel.
Honestly, if it weren't for Freezie randomly reaching out to me under my Greenbuster video, there's a good chance this video you're watching right now would have never existed. I don't really have a good transition because I honestly intended to put this creator right alongside Rubes because they make similar content, but up next is Julian and Neo.
Yo, what's good everybody? It's your boy YT Jux back. I'm with the boy, it's Neo, and I just want to say I want to give a huge thanks to Shabunka for having us on. I want to get right into this. Onion-san explains deaths. That is not a joke.
100% serious. Why is he telling the truth?
So every chapter, 1 and 2, we would be able to talk to Onion-san in the Light World segment. We would talk to Onion-san by the lake. Onion-san would talk to us about random stuff, but Onion-san told us that to hear a song from the sea, from the depths of the sea.
Now, this is interesting, right? Because water is paralleled, or it's symbolism for darkness. I mean, at the end of chapter 4, you can hear, or Susie says she hears a song from the other side of the lake. Not sure if that's the same song, but I mean, I guess we're gonna have to find out.
We're rolling with that. We're rolling with that for this theory, though. Same song.
Gerson's intro dialogue, right? He says, "Do you hear this? The sound or the song singing from the deep? That is the ringing of the Hammer of Justice." Right? The Hammer of Justice boss fight is a secret boss fight. That's freedom being shown through those secret bosses, right? That's the whole theme of the secret bosses. So what would the Song of the Sea be if not for freedom, right? A song yearning for freedom. And the Knight is a secret boss, and if we think the Knight is Death, if we go by that assumption, that's more symbolism of freedom being tied to Death.
So yeah, Death is likely trapped in the bunker dark world and is possibly communicating with us via sound waves within that dark world that is somehow being transferred into actual waves in the lake that Onion-san is hearing.
And this is how I think it works. The sound might be like so loud or so maybe at the edge of the dark world.
We don't know how it works in the dark worlds, how sound translates from a dark world to the light world.
Exactly. The bunker would be underground, which would maybe travel, like maybe one of the walls are next to the ocean.
I think so.
So
it's possible.
The sound maybe reverberates out of it and into the water as actual waves.
And those waves is what Onion-san hears. So I believe that Onion-san could hear this, and having no friends, realistically, Onion-san follows this sound, follows this song that they hear throughout the nighttime, every night. And one day, somehow come into contact with Des, and we come to find out that Des is actually trying to reach people with these sound waves
Yeah,
playing this song from the Dark World.
When we get to the Shelter Dark World, we might even be hearing that song in the like actual soundtrack.
I think that would be insane. Imagine we enter the Dark World and we hear the actual song. What song it is?
Imagine
it could be Find Her.
Imagine Chapter 6, Song from the Sea.
Literally,
So,
it
like,
could
an
just be
area
Song
theme.
from the Sea. So one day, Onion-san actually gets into contact with Des and they become friends. And Des is using Onion-san to help her escape. Or they're more so working together, right? Well, not for long. Because the reason we haven't seen Onion-san in multiple chapters, now 2 chapters, is because Gaster slimed out Onion-san for being a noticer, getting too close to the truth. It happened, okay? It happened. Ah!
Gaster sent follower 3. Gaster sent follower 3. That is why the bird from the library left the library for the first time and was seen in the rain at the edge of the...
At the dock.
At the dock.
Right at the dock.
Where Onion-san was. And said, wait, don't. Wait, don't. Don't wait. Know why? Because Onion-san
ain't coming!
Yeah.
Onion-san's gone!
Exactly. And we're going to see Onion-san's corpse floating in water in the Chapter 6 Dark World. That is our theory. Like and subscribe to Shabunka.
Like, subscribe to us, please. Thanks.
Yeah.
I genuinely thought I was going crazy when I got this submission because literally the same day I was streaming and the chat would not stop talking about some theory about how Des and Onion-san are connected. In any case, my next guest is the absolute pinnacle of what this theory challenge represents, so I knew I had to invite him. That person, of course, being PyxlWhip.
Shabunka messed up because I've gone over dozens of awful theories over many videos, including but not limited to Kris, Rules Card, Spamton, and Tenna being pregnant from multiple circumstances, Ralsei being a tampon in the light world, Kris Goon theory, Susie being racist twice, Noelle being a freak that looks at yams, and Kris mitosis theory. But my top pick for these would have to be poop theory. Let me explain. There's an NPC in Undertale who reveals that monsters don't have waste. Their food just gets completely absorbed. Monsters don't fart, piss, or shit, meaning Toriel cannot drop trowel and pinch out a mean duke. However, why does the Dreamer house have a toilet? Kris is a human who likely has regular digestive processes, so it makes sense for their house to have a turlet, so Kris can absolutely paint the walls brown. But why does the Holiday house have one then? Yeah, in chapter 4, we get to see Noelle's house, which has a bathroom with a toilet inside. Why would the Holidays need a toilet in their house when monsters don't poop? Leading to the theory of Des being human, a weird outcast like Kris who shares their longing for wanting to be a cute, fluffy animal creature. So she dresses in funny antlers to fit in, much like how Kris wore fake animal horns when they were little to fit in with monsters. So yeah, it's basically a reskin of Des is a human theory, but proven by both of them absolutely blowing the bathroom up. That's my theory. I'm going to laugh so hard if Des ends up being a human, and our foreshadowing was that both houses had a fucking toilet in them. Thank you, Shabunka, for letting me participate, and back to you.
I don't think I messed up in terms of selecting PyxlWhip to feature in my video, as they did exactly what I asked for. Anyway, here starts the section of the video where I start featuring Deltarune theories that I actually watch on my free time, because contrary to what you may think, I don't actually watch much Deltarune theory content. We'll start first with my GOAT, Elliot.
Hi everyone, I'm ElliotOnline, the guy known for making Deltarune YouTube shorts and the Among Us video. Let's talk about time loop theory. This theory states that the events of Deltarune we are playing through will either end up in a perpetual time loop, or the events we're playing through have happened before and the characters in Deltarune are already in a perpetual time loop. Now this was an old theory that's existed for a while, and while interesting, I thought that didn't really have much merit at all thematically and evidence-wise, and it was just an excuse to say that ChocoFox is gonna do the same thing he did with Undertale again, instead of, you know, doing something different and actually unique. However, since chapter 4, I believe there's a lot more evidence for this, and for some reason, a lot of it really relates to Susie. Susie wanting for stuff to go on forever, aka what Gerson calls choosing eternity. The end of Deltarune chapter 4 having Susie saying she wants tomorrow to just be an everlasting, ever-looping event so that they could always go back to the way things were before. Additionally, in chapter 1, there's this unused part in the opening title where a slowed, echoed Susie screams for Kris to wake up. Okay, I know it's unused, but like, Toby Fox, come on. He just abandoned and left it there like a cancelled object show season. But I'm gonna bet, for the purpose of this video at least, that he's gonna revisit this idea. Like a cancelled object show season. Here's something that's in the game that many people didn't notice. I only noticed it while watching Garden Grove's Chapter 3 and 4 replay livestream. In this Noelle and Susie scene, yes, it's related to her again, while they're both holding the soul down, Noelle says this.
It's funny. I was so nervous earlier. I've never actually hung out with you, you know? But so far, it just kind of feels like I don't even know why I was nervous. It just feels like I already know you.
This scene is why I think Toby Fox's writing is so good. When analyzing the scene in context of the game, it demonstrates how Noelle and Susie are similar despite what they both thought about each other before they met. It shows their development and how close they've grown and familiarized themselves with each other, which, like Birdley's canine— What the f? Why is that in the script? This isn't the FNAF 4 theory where the crying child had like a dog. Which, like Birdley's scene in the library, emphasizes the events of chapter 2 mattered. That's consistent, believable development. But additionally, you can also apply this dialogue to theories. In terms of time loop theory, this piece of dialogue says so much. Not only does this echo Undertale dialogue where characters have slightly faded but still recognizable memories from resets, literally past timelines, and also we genuinely could have the instance of the past timeline Noelle's unconsciously talking about. From the Spampton Sweepstakes website ARG is the post The Newest Girl, a private post written by Noelle detailing an encounter she witnessed between Susie and Kris. Susie, after bullying Kris and mentioning how their mom would be happy without them, Kris talks, saying something that makes Susie leave. It's so strange to me because the vibe of this post, while it's not impossible, it feels like the start of chapter 1 couldn't have happened if this post happened, especially with Susie mentioning Kris's mom again. I feel like whatever Kris said should have put that form of bullying, like Susie mentioning Toriel to Kris, kinda redundant, like it should be off limits now because of the incident, but no. Either it happened again, or this was the first time it happened. The same event, but slightly different, yet the same. There's some other stuff this Tumblr thread talking about time loop theory mentions, but my favorite is the fact that the Deltarune logo, after this voice, which is the same as one of Gaster's CTS voices in this by the way, divides itself into multiple logos. While one never strays far from the center, they all slightly vary. Still, they encircle each other, like they're meant to be on one straight path but keep deviating. Like timelines meant to be the same, but as time goes on, something slightly different occurs. Alright, so that's my evidence, but I'm not just gonna talk about proving time loop theory. I wanna talk about reasoning. Because a lot of theories I see want to talk about some insane plot stuff happening, but like, what about its relation to the themes? Anyway, so I think time loop theory can easily tie into the theme of escapism throughout Deltarune. I believe Susie represents a lot of themes in the game, like identity and anti-fatalism, but one of the strongest themes presented in Susie's character is escapism. Just look at all the evidence of this theory. It's Susie wanting to escape her familiarly cruel reality in favor of what happens in new, unfamiliar, and unexplored dark worlds. I believe that time loop theory, if it's happened in a way that Deltarune has time looped before and the way we play it can change the events of the story, it won't defeat the themes of the story and would serve an in-game purpose, playing different routes to try and break out of the time loop. While the iconic one ending Toby Fox fever dreamed of does put a snag in this theory, I think what this theory is saying can still apply in some way. Who knows? Thank you for listening, subscribe to Shabunka, follow ElliotOnline for more, and find a way to watch the show Infinity Train. Because the Among Us creator made that show, did you know that Petra from Minecraft Story Mode also voices Purple?
No, Elliot, I did not know that. Anyways, I'd say this theory is actually pretty normal too, seeing as I had heard of it before the making of this video. That being said though, I've always personally been a defactor of it. I just find this theory to be kind of boring, to be honest. And like with the Susie half-human theory, it's mostly based on one line of dialogue, so I don't know. That's just my take, no hate on Elliot of course. Now onto my fellow Death Knight denier, LimecrowPlays.
As a Deltarune fan, it's sometimes hard not to get overexcited about small details that could foreshadow major things about the future of the game. In this creator sphere, I've tried to establish myself as the voice of reason. You could hand me all the evidence towards Death Knight, and I'd still place it as not yet canon because the knight hasn't said, "My name is December Death Holiday." It doesn't matter how compelling your argument is, I run on the belief that nothing is promised to us, and that everything is just a theory until proven otherwise. Today, we're throwing that belief out the window as I try to quickly explain a theory I have about our favourite fluffball, Ralsei. So, just to catch everyone up to speed, there's a popular theory that Ralsei is going to fight the Shadow Crystal boss of Chapter 5 on his own, with the evidence so far being that Ralsei is yet to have a weapon on the level of the Black Shard and Justice Axe and needs one, and he's the only one of the main trio who hasn't had a chapter dedicated to him yet, with Chapter 3 being dedicated to Kris and Chapter 4 being dedicated to Susie. And not focusing on one member of your core trio would just be incredibly bad writing. But if we really stop to think about it, who can he even fight? Sans? I mean, it'd be funny, but I don't really know how you'd organically fit him into the story at this point. Asgore? Nope. He's way too important to the main plot to be relegated to an optional boss battle. A new Darkner? Well, that could work, but This is the final Shadow Crystal boss, the one preventing us from gaining access to the pure crystal, which can get us the Twisted Sword with possibly other things. Instead, I think we should look at things from a different perspective. What if instead of Ralsei fighting the final Shadow Crystal boss, he is the final Shadow Crystal boss? Now, this isn't just a wouldn't this be cool sort of theory. I do have actual evidence for this, so let's go over it. The first one is, to me at least, Ralsei fits in heavily with the freedom theming with the Shadow Crystal bosses. If we look at Jevil, we'll notice his reaction to discovering his lack of freedom is to just pretend that he's completely free while everyone else is trapped. He refuses to believe his actions have consequences, saying that he can do anything, since in the end, his choices don't matter. Spamton reacts very differently. While he also rejects his lack of freedom, it's different to Jevil. Spamton chases glory, craving to become a big shot, and doing whatever it takes to reach that goal. He insists his choices matter, but they never did. I'll cover Wereramb and the Knight at the same time, since they're both very similar in regards to how they connect to freedom, and I honestly believe they're the same character, but that's a theory for another day. Both of them take the approach of thinking that no one else's freedom matters, while theirs does. They believe that the Fun Gang can't stop the prophecy, and therefore, as individuals who want the prophecy to happen, believe their choices in pushing it forward matter. But in the end, it won't result in anything changing. Gerson, otherwise known as the Old Man, doesn't use his Shadow Crystal, but still rejects his lack of freedom. The man is stuck in a snow globe, for God's sake. He doesn't refuse to accept the fact that his choices don't matter, because he knows they don't matter in the grand scheme of things. But they matter to him. That's why he keeps making choices. Ralsei fits in a similar way to Ramb. Obviously, Ralsei wants to believe his choices do matter. We see as much from the fact he insists on pacifism where necessary to try and change the prophecy. He gets extremely overwhelmed when he realizes that his future is already decided. He chooses to dedicate himself to serving the Lightners, as a way of proving to himself that his choices do matter. Some of you may have already discovered a pattern between these Shadow Crystal bosses from the descriptions I gave, but for everyone else, these 5 are representations of the 5 stages of grief. Jevil is denial, Spamton is anger, the Knight is bargaining, Ralsei is depression, Gerson is acceptance. But why would depression and acceptance be swapped? Well, that's because Ralsei is going to complete a part of his character arc by transitioning from depression to acceptance. Now, before any of you question why an optional questline would be required to further Ralsei's character development, I would like to point out a couple things. One being that every Shadow Crystal boss is getting harder and harder to miss. Jevil has nothing obvious to help you discover him, Spamton tells you to return to a shop that is out of the way, the Knight is a required encounter, and Gerson's questline start point is in a required area with the promise of a strong weapon as the reward. It's possible that Ralsei's fight will be required while still granting the final Shadow Crystal. Another thing is that people are theorizing that Deltarune only having one ending is to establish the theme of how something ends isn't important, it's the journey you take. And Ralsei's character arc being optional would fit in with that theme. A last small note is that Ralsei being in the possession of a Shadow Crystal would explain how he knows the layout of the school, as well as the prophecy. In addition, the fact that Shadow Crystals carry over even when you delete your save data heavily implies that Tubbi wants us to collect them for something big. A huge thank you to Shabunka for letting me be a part of this huge project. I still can't believe this is all happening. Please subscribe to both of us. I try to post videos weekly while also streaming 3 days a week. If you're watching this, then high chances are you'll enjoy my content.
I think I remember this theory of We Fight Ralsei / Ralsei Secret Boss being somewhat popular back in the chapter 1 and 2 days, but it was mostly because of the whole Ralsei is evil movement. So I'm really glad Lime actually logged in and provided pretty compelling evidence for this argument. Anyway, here's another one of my personal favorite Deltarune YouTubers and another proclaimed voice of reason. Can you tell I prefer a certain type of Deltarune theorist?
Hi, I'm Kris, and you're watching the Disney Channel. If you've seen any of my videos, no, not that one. You'll know I try to go for pretty grounded and tame theories and conclusions. I'm more of a narrative analysis guy than a theorist. However, there is one crackpot theory I genuinely believe in. That is vegan Penumbra Phantasm. If that made sense to you, I'm sorry. I hope you're also in therapy. So back before chapters 3 and 4, we discovered an old ChocoFox song from before Deltarune titled Nightmare Night. Given Tubbi's history of repurposing his old songs for Undertale and Deltarune, people drew the obvious conclusion that this song would become a battle theme for the Roaring Night. Adding fuel to the fire was the fact that the main melody of Nightmare Night was actually very musically similar to an existing melody in the Deltarune soundtrack, used in The Door and The Chase. Fast forward to the release of Chapter 3, the Roaring Night jump scares all the Kris Nighters and chess theorists, but all the music nerds were jump scared by something else. While he didn't straight up reuse Nightmare Night, he basically created a legally distinct version using the exact Deltarune melody people originally called out as being similar to Nightmare Night. And we know this was always his intention because the file for Black Knife says it was created all the way back in 2018. In other words, we actually kinda got something right for once. That leads us to the other old ChocoFox song people think will appear in Deltarune, Penumbra Phantasm. I'm gonna assume you know what's up with this song, partially because I don't have the time to explain it all here, and there are plenty of video essays out there going over the subject. Honestly, Penumbra Phantasm had more evidence going for it than Nightmare Night, and many theorized it could be the final boss theme of Deltarune, and then our theories were shot 27 times. As ChocoFox personally said, he would not be using any Homestuck music in Deltarune, ignoring the fact that Sans' theme, April 2012, and Fanfare all originate from Homestuck adjacent projects. But then, in the Undertale 10th anniversary livestream, ChocoFox directly confirmed that he referenced one of the main melodies of Penumbra Phantasm in Hopes and Dreams, the Doctor motif, and then he later stated that he would no longer be referencing that melody because the original composer of that motif has since passed away. It seems like Penumbra Phantasm theory has been found dead in the streets, but I think it's still possible Toby does something similar to Black Knife and creates a legally distinct version of Penumbra Phantasm that doesn't contain any of the original melodies, or as some people have dubbed this, a vegan Penumbra Phantasm. Now, does this theory require an entire iceberg chart of ball knowledge loosely tied together on a conspiracy corkboard, all to come to the conclusion that ChocoFox will make an original song that just has the holy motif in it? Yes, okay. I guess if you want to be more specific, I think the final boss theme of Deltarune will contain the holy motif, and be an indirect reference to Penumbra Phantasm with how it's composed.
I cannot tell you how genuinely baffled I was while cramped up in a car for travel and checking my phone to see Chris Roomba emailing me to tell me that their theory will be about, quote, vegan Penumbra Phantasm. I was speechless. Anyways, on to another one of my Delta Goats, and the third to last creator, Sodaman.
I believe Asgore was not fired for messing up the disappearance case, as I think would be the common community consensus. I believe he was fired specifically for misusing one of the 3 shelter codes, the one assigned to the current chief of police. The current police force in Hometown with Undyne in charge is frequently portrayed as a bumbling roadblock to public safety. They're much more likely to get in the way and make the town less safe just by existing than they are to perform any normal police duties competently. Instead, Carol handles the crime fighting on her own, according to Alphys. It's because of the mayor there isn't any crime. Makes me wonder if she even needs the police, or if they're just getting in her way. So instead of fighting crime, what reason does Carol have to keep the police force around? Well, how about for a reason that apparently frightens even the fearless Undyne? Holding on to the shelter code. The police don't exist to fight crime, they exist solely to safeguard that code. This already starts to clash with the idea that Asgore was fired for screwing up a missing persons case. Screwing up a normal police duty is expected of the hometown police, and Undyne would certainly be worse at a job like finding a missing person that requires a lot more delicacy. Let's assume that it was screwed up so badly that Carol personally vented her anger by firing Asgore. Seeing as her primary character trait at this point is her obsessive need to preserve things as they are, especially related to her children, losing her daughter is a catastrophe, the ultimate failure of that primal need of hers. So why would she turn around and cordially hire Asgore in the present day, while supporting his flower shop and his you-know-what, which is his obsession over something, likely the disappearance itself? No, Carol clearly trusts Asgore enough to enable and employ him, and to allow him access to her home, including her locked bedroom. So to me, the only reasonable explanation is that Carol felt forced to fire Asgore over his failing to handle properly a duty which is pivotal to the police force, the only duty for the police chief that matters, but which is much less personal to Carol herself, the safeguarding of the shelter key. I think a likely scenario is his misuse of the keys to enter the shelter without permission, but it could have also been Asgore allowing the key to be stolen and used by someone else.
I really like theories that are a sort of fresh take on something, and then the fresh take, isn't entirely crazy or out there. Even as an Asgore and Des have some sort of lore believer, I found this theory to be very intriguing, in only 2 minutes, no less. Now for the second to last theorist, well, there's a chance you haven't heard of her, but I watched one of her videos after she requested to feature in this one, and even 5 minutes into the video, I was blown away. I really think she deserves a lot more than what she's got, so here's a bite-sized demo of her content.
Hello. My name is Choco, and welcome to JockingSIN Theory, the theory that Jockington is the snake from Adam and Eve and will convince you to sin, but that maybe that's a good thing? JockingSIN is a seemingly innocuous joke character, but many, including me, have noticed something more sinister under the surface. In the 2 JockingSIN prophecy rooms, an NPC speaks of a shadow. Come 5 o'clock, the shadow will grow. Before the clock strikes midnight, the shadow will grow. Oh, the shadow will grow, serpentine. Even when the clock ran back, the shadow was growing, a patch of shadow, slithering on, serpentine. This obviously connects JockingSIN very closely to shadows, but not only that, in the flavor text of the Titan boss fight, it says, the darkness slithers. The darkness gives a long gaze, which slithered like a snake. Even the phrase, darkness constricts you, could be a nod to constrictor snakes. Not only that, but in the Jackenstein fight, which takes place in the Dark Zone, one of the mazes is made up of snakes. All this talk of darkness is very, very familiar. JockingSIN also has inexplicable knowledge about the game. For example, try to be that dunk is seemingly in reference to the ending of Chapter 4, something which he shouldn't know about. And one that I noticed, long and short, cold and hot, is about 2 things which seem to be very important to Deltarune. All the other characters who have strange knowledge about Deltarune's world often have connections to Gaster, which leads me to believe that JockingSIN may be the same. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but JockingSIN is green, and I subscribe to the idea of green and in between, which is a theory I can't get into right now, but basically all you need to know is that Gaster is probably green. Gaster is also very closely associated with the number 666, linking him to the devil, and JockingSIN by association. Because of this, I think it's very possible that JockingSIN is the Tail of Hell, and if you believe that the Tail of Hell must be a cat petter's thing, well, JockingSIN's best friend, Catty, is a pink and yellow cat. Although I find it less likely that JockingSIN is the pointed tail that the children followed. I think it's more likely that he will become the new Tail of Hell, although I guess anything is possible. Before we continue, I think it's important that we set the precedent that Deltarune uses Christian themes in its storytelling. And with that, let's talk about the story of Adam and Eve. For this theory, all you really need to know is that in the Garden of Eden, Eve was convinced by a snake, which in certain interpretations is Satan in disguise, to go against God's will to eat the forbidden fruit, an apple from the Tree of Knowledge. With this, we can map these roles onto Deltarune characters, and if you've been paying attention, you'll probably know that I think that JockingSIN is the snake. I hope that I've already proven his importance to the story going forward, but he is also very hell-related. The next most obvious one to me is that Kris is the apple. In-game, they are constantly tied to apples in the text itself. And before we can figure out who Eve is, we need to know what God's will is that she is going to disobey. In Deltarune, there is one set path, truth written in glass, created by a being we can't understand. No one can change fate. I believe that God's will is the prophecy, and that whoever wrote it is Deltarune's equivalent to God. If this is the case, then there's really only one person that Eve could be, the destroyer of fate herself, Susie. This would also line up with her being literally the only person who cares about Kris's hair smelling like apples, and in fact, drinking their apple-scented shampoo on multiple occasions. She is called the Dragon by Gerson, which in Christianity is considered a satanic symbol. Susie also is very closely associated with fire, which is a hell thing. In fact, all of the heroes have some connection to hell, which tells me that all of these characters are probably on the same team. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that they're all evil. In fact, it's very important that we detach the real-world connotations of heaven and hell in order to understand whatever the new meaning is that Tubbi is trying to convey. In my mind, heaven and hell represent 2 sides of a conflict, fate versus those who want to break it. And with that, we have the full picture. In tempting Susie to sin, he's actually helping her in her goal to break the prophecy. You may be wondering then, when will all this happen? Well, JockingSIN's speech is becoming increasingly unhinged as time goes on, leading me to believe that he's reaching a breaking point. In this prophecy room, the NPC says, "Come 5 o'clock, the shadow will grow." Now, this is obviously a 5 o'clock shadow joke, but it could have a double meaning, that in Chapter 5, the shadow will grow. Although it says that JockingSIN will grow the beard, JockingSIN himself says that he can't grow hair. Now, there's no magic in the light world, but there is in the dark world, which makes me believe that it's possible that JockingSIN and Caddy will go to the Chapter 5 Dark World, where Caddy may cast some sort of spell to make him grow a beard. The specific phrasing of JockingSIN grows the beard is reminiscent of a term meaning the point where a story gets more interesting. Now, it's been confirmed by TobyFox himself that Chapter 5 is the last fun chapter. So, I think it's possible that JockingSIN growing the beard could mark the transition between the fun chapters and whatever comes next. And wouldn't it be perfect if all of this happened in the Garden of a Dark World that is Chapter 5, mirroring the Garden of Eden? My only question then is, what does Susie metaphorically eating Kris mean? And to this, I have no clue. You can feel free to come up with your own ideas. In conclusion, sinning is awesome? Anyway, I've been ChocoFox7. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Shabunka for having me. And with that, I wish you all a happy Chapter 5. Goodbye.
Pretty good, like I said, right? She told me she was totally locked in on this project, which I was like so honored to hear, you know? Speaking of locking in on this project, there's only one theory left, and I specifically reserved this spot for this creator because if not for him, this video wouldn't have come out in time. So this is my way of thanking him by giving him the primetime recency bias benefiting last slot. Take it away, Luke.
I'm Lukerfuffle, and I believe that if December Holiday is human, she is the Cyan Soul. For the uninitiated, a quick rundown. A theory which gained popularity following the release of Deltarune's 4th chapter is that Des, sister of Noelle, daughter of Carol and Rudy, was an adopted human just like Kris. This theory has a surprising amount of support from shoes to gingerbread to headbands, but there are plenty of amazing videos outlining these aspects. Let's assume for our purposes this theory is true, that Des is human and now some aspect of her being has been distorted into the Roaring Night. What's the deal with her soul? In Undertale, we play as the Red Soul, same as in Deltarune, but in the prior, there are 6 other souls belonging to the fallen humans that came before us. Connected to each are a weapon and a piece of equipment scattered throughout the underground. The first set we find is a toy knife and a faded ribbon. We know these belong to the Cyan Soul thanks to the Omega Flowey battle, in which Flowey's manipulation of each soul manifests as an attack, with the Cyan Soul's attack pattern being an entourage of spinning knives. Knives are extremely important to the visual language of both games, with Kris notoriously carrying a knife everywhere they go. Most significantly though, the title of the Roaring Knight's battle theme is Black Knife, and in the prophecy they're given the title of Night Which Makes with Blackened Knife. We also learn from Ralsei that the prophecy's hero titled The Girl is supposed to equip ribbons, and another popular theory by LoreFacts proposes that Des was the girl in the prophecy before our heroes. All that being said, it's interesting that the Cyan Soul's equipment is a knife and a ribbon. But if Des was human in both Deltarune and Undertale, how would that have worked? What with Undertale Asgore's murderous decree and the events which occurred leading to our arrival in the Underground. We know so very little about the fallen humans of Undertale, but we do know about the ultimate fate of Des. In the 5th Anniversary's Alarm Clock dialogue released by TobyFox himself, Asgore states that Rudy's daughters both get to experience life on the surface, growing up in the sun. How can Des be alive in Undertale's true pacifist ending and the first human soul harvested? In that true pacifist ending, following Asriel's use of the souls to fully break the barrier, the coffins in the basement of the castle are open and empty, except for one, the Red Soul, once belonging to Kara. We know Kara's soul is within Frisk, and we know Kara's body isn't there. When Toriel left, she took their body to give it a proper burial in the ruins, presumably where the bed of golden flowers now lies. What this means to me is that these coffins were holding the bodies of the fallen humans, that they were potentially an invention meant to preserve them in case the barrier could be broken without permanently using their souls up, which Asriel was able to do with our help. And once the barrier was broken, the souls were free, so they returned to their bodies and left. And what's the one coffin not open and empty in this ending? Kara's. Because their body isn't there, but everyone else's was, including Des's. The Cyan Soul's trait is patience, and it's implied to have been the first soul taken. There's something profoundly tragic and beautiful to me in the idea that Des waited so long, longer than any other soul, to see her sister again, to see the light of the world once more, and that she was eventually able to. In Deltarune, there is a voice hidden in the code, someone alone and scared who has lost all sense of time and space. They speak about vague memories, about nightmares and hope, all seemingly to no one. And yet we hear them as they speak into this nothingness. We are with them in the dark. I believe that Des is simultaneously this voice and the roaring night. That her soulless body has been distorted by darkness into what we know as the night, and that this voice is her lost soul, the Cyan soul, waiting ever so patiently to be found. As you can probably tell, I have a lot more to say on this subject, but much of it boils down to fanfic. How Des fell while Kara was still alive, leading to the Dreamers turning to the holidays to adopt her, how they raised her in Snowdin, hence how intrinsically tied the Cyan attacks are to that location and its inhabitants. Lots of fun stuff like that we just don't have time for today. This video is such an incredible celebration of this chaotic, wild community and all of the theories that we've gotten to create together. Truly, I am so grateful that I get to be a part of it, and that I got to be a part of this video. Huge thanks to the one and only Shabunka for putting this all together, and to you, thanks for watching.
And that was the final theory. A good way to end off, if I do say so myself. I hope you enjoyed this little project of mine. A lot of it was rushed in the last 2 weeks before Chapter 5's release, so I hope it wasn't too obviously scuffed. I totally want to do something like this again sometime. A love letter to the community that has given me a place to belong and a time capsule for us to all look back on. While I'm here, I'd like to thank a few people who helped me a bunch with this project. Please don't click off just yet, because I do have a way for you as viewers to get involved. Kind of. With that, I should first, of course, thank all the wonderful creators who contributed a theory to this video. Without them, this video would have really just been a silly pipe dream of mine, and even when we ended up getting hit with a really tight deadline, they all stuck it through with me. Many of these creators are also just like genuinely kind people as well, and that was really beautiful to see. Speaking of, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Freezie, Tubbi, my real-life friend Defender, another real-life friend Piper, and most importantly, Brix Braxium for their help on this project. Without these people to assist me, I wouldn't have been able to reach nearly as many of these creators as I did, so I really owe them a lot. Brix Braxium specifically helped put me into contact with people like Seek and even Halberd Chaos. Also, while Halberd Chaos may not have contributed a theory, they did help me with working out how to pay my fellow creators for their work, which I'm very grateful for. Side note, I totally wasn't low-key fangirling when I was able to speak with Halberd Chaos because they're like kind of a big inspiration for me. Finally, I'd like to thank you, the viewers. I know it's kind of cheesy to do so, but I am being genuine. Had I not had as many subscribers as I do now, or had my announcement video for this project flopped, I don't think nearly as many as the creators as I've got now would have even given me the time of day. So, genuinely, thank you. Now about how you as viewers can get involved, let me share a little secret with you. And when I say secret, I mean I genuinely didn't tell any of the creators involved that I was going to do this, but, drumroll please. Ta-da! The top link in the description is a link to a Google form where you, yes you, can vote for your favorite theory in this video, and the winner will get absolutely nothing! Yeah, I don't really have a prize in mind at the moment, and honestly, I don't really want there to be a prize, because this is mostly just for fun. I implore you to go and vote for your favorite theory, though. Don't just vote for the popular guys because they're your favorite YouTuber, please. I'll be tallying up the votes in 1 month, so step to it. With that, thank you all so much for tuning in, and until next time, peace.